Welcome back to today's anatomy question. We're talking about stress incontinence today. Mary Richards is with us, the fearless and extremely competent, well-informed and charming Mary Richards. I'm Lizzie Lassiter. We're going to talk about, so what happened? I was talking on the phone and I was walking across the street this weekend and they made me laugh on the phone and I peed in my pants a little bit, like because I was walking and then I started laughing even more. And I said, I'm no longer, since I gave birth to my twins or went through my pregnancy with twins, like I'm no longer really capable of laughing and walking at the same time. Same thing, like sneezing and walking has now become like a pretty risky maneuver.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show the websites and then Mary, the question is, what is going on with that? What do we need to be doing to rectify or to come to terms with the reality that
Yeah.
walking and laughing has now become super risky? Here are my cards. Let me make myself big. This is Yoga with Mary Richards. That's Mary's website. You want to go there, sign up for her newsletter, and find out what she's doing on the internet. You also should go to my website and sign up for my free newsletter, which is Rest with Lizzie Lassiter. And my website is lizzie.yoga. Then Mary and I are collaborating here at Lassiter.yoga. We have two courses that are available there. One is called Somatic Strength and one is called Deep Rest. The last place to go to sign up for our free anatomy newsletter is here, experientialanatomy.yoga. All right, Mary, and I've stalled long enough. What have you got?
Yeah. So what you're describing is the combination of concussive impact, our relationship with ground reaction forces. Every time we, strike the earth with our heel, there's a ripple effect, right? And you're laughing. So you're contracting your abdominal muscles. So you're contracting your belly and you're bouncing on the earth and you're going to leak a little urine. And you can thank your kids for this as well as aging. So here's the deal. The overwhelming majority of us, of women, of folks with female anatomy, is we're going to experience stress incontinence at some point in our lives. This happens, by the way, to men too, with folks that, have a prostate, because we're aging and we're swimming in a sea of gravity, which is always pulling down on us. So in every single body on the planet, no matter what your anatomy is, your organs, as you age, are going to be pulled down toward your feet. And what happens as they're pulled forward and down toward your feet is they become more sensitive to bouncing. And so if you have urine in your bladder, it's gonna say, oh, need to let go of a little of that. And it sucks, because it'll affect you when you're laughing, coughing, sneezing. If you're doing Uttanasana and you have maybe you still have a little urine in your bladder, or maybe you've been practicing for a while and you haven't really relieved yourself since you started before you started your practice. And then next thing you know, you're doing Uttanasana or Janu Sirsasana or Paschimottanasana, and you're like, oh, this was a mistake. I better run to the bathroom. So again, a lot of this is related to gravity, but then for those of us with female anatomy who have had vaginal birth, cesarean birth, doesn't matter, carried pregnancy to term, had babies, your bladder is like, what? What just happened? Because all of your organs get disrupted as you progress through pregnancy.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and show this because we just were pulling this up before we started recording. And exactly as Mary's describing, I was like, oh, there's the bladder. What's it sitting underneath of? The uterus. And so no wonder the bladder is so grumpy when you go through a pregnancy, because the uterus just expands and all that water and baby and placenta are just sitting on the poor little bladder. Like,
crushing it, and also expanding upward. Because see, that's what happens. Your uterus doesn't move as you progress through pregnancy. It grows.
It's like a bubble, like a bubble gum bubble.
Exactly, or like a balloon. Yeah, a balloon that expands. And so what happens is the bladder gets squished, and all of the intestines and the like above and behind the uterus get squished. So we have disruptions to our digestion. We'll have acid reflux, heartburn, things like that, indigestion, may have constipation issues because there's just no room for us to evacuate our bowels. You'll have difficulty breathing because there's no longer the real estate available for the diaphragm to stretch down toward the feet when we're going to take in an inhalation. And so all of these things happen. And of course, the bladder is behind the pubic bones, and there's a uterus sitting on top of it. So, and this, by the way, can happen during the menstrual cycle too. As you get closer to the onset of your bleeding, well, guess what? Your uterine volume has changed a bit because you're getting ready to have your period. And so you may find you have to pee more frequently, or you may be more prone to UTIs, urinary tract infections, because you may not be able to void your bladder completely.
So what I want to know, this is so fascinating, Mary. It sounds like what you're saying is this stress incontinence, which is the technical term for a little bit of wee in your pants while you're actually, I'm just remembering at that moment when this triggering story happened, I was carrying Felix on my shoulders. So I had a 3.5-year-old so I was, and then walking and holding my phone, FaceTiming, and then laughing. And it was like,
yeah.
So what you're saying, what I'm understanding what you're saying is this is just a mechanical function that's happening, that it's just gravity plus the pressure of laughing and walking at the same time is just mechanically causing a little bit of urine to escape. What can we do from a yoga perspective, from a somatic strength perspective, to support this not happening? Or is it a lost cause?
Oh, no. There's so many things we can do. Now, let me just add a caveat that if you've had hysterectomy and you've had your uterus, your cervix, your fallopian tubes removed, even you've had your ovaries removed as well, what happens when you've had your uterus and any other related organs removed is you've changed your visceral column, and your GI tract is falling down into your pelvis, and your bladder will prolapse faster and further because it's no longer got some of its jigsaw pieces. Because it's not like the organs are just stuffed into the abdominopelvic cavity. They sit in relationship to one another in such a way that it actually helps support us posturally. And so the bladder is sort of left hanging out to dry, for lack of a better term. And so about 50% of women who have hysterectomy will be coping with stress incontinence for the rest of their lives. It's a 50-50 shot for those of us in that club. But we can improve our odds. And for all of us, there are things that we can do that make a huge difference. And so if we think about this, that stress incontinence is, and again, stress incontinence is far more prevalent in women than it is with men. Men will experience stress incontinence as their prostate enlarges. That's common, but it's just not as common for women because, men aren't going through menses, decades of menstrual changes. They're not getting pregnant and having babies. And if you also consider that some of us have cesarean birth, where the abdominal wall has been disrupted and the bladder has been disrupted in that surgery, they have to just kind of move the bladder around a bit to get the baby or babies out of the uterus with the laparotomy, the incision of cesarean. So that affects your ability to your musculoskeletal ability, your actual physical ability to maintain your abdominal pressure. And abdominal pressure is really important for dealing with stress incontinence. Now, mind you, we're not talking about urge incontinence. That's something else, you know, where you feel like you have to pee all the time. That's another thing. We're talking about stress incontinence, which is a mechanical thing related to our core stabilization skills, the position of our organs, our hormones, and again, if we've experienced the disruptions attendant with pregnancy and birth, however the birth occurred. Okay. And
so when you say core stabilization, Mary, I just can't resist. This is accidentally turning into a promo, but I've got to just show the website, Lassiter.yoga. This is the place where you can find our somatic strength course. And in that course, Mary is obsessed with teaching us core stabilization skills, aka plank, in all of her myriad beautiful. I gotta put it in Galley. You gotta see Mary's laughing at me. We do a lot of plank, but it is a lot of core stabilization, which I think, you know, I have this smart scale in my bathroom and I just weighed myself yesterday, and on the app it said I have like, I was on the almost, I was still in the average range, but I was on like the high end, the red end of average in amount of muscle for my height and weight, which I don't know how the smart scale knows that, but supposedly it felt good. And I was thinking, thank you, Mary Richards. Thank you, somatic strength. Thank you, core stabilization.
I mean, core stabilization is really a key to our health. And so it's also very important for our, you know, our urinary system. So many of us, of course, have heard about doing Kegels or Kegels, however you want to pronounce it, Kegel exercises, where we're consciously contracting around the urethral opening, the vaginal opening, and the anal opening. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of folks over-contract around the urethra, under-contract around the vaginal and anal openings. And so we develop imbalances in our muscle activation patterns in the pelvic floor, which we actually do talk about in somatic strength. So, but this is key, that we're not just doing Kegel exercises, but we also may need to do some pelvic floor training involving Kegel weights or myofascial release with a little pinky ball, you know, where we're sitting on a little rubber ball and we're working around each sitting bone, you know, on top of the ball, so that we're, you know, relieving some muscle tension in the pelvic floor. So there's that. Okay. The problem with emphasizing the pelvic floor, I know that I'm saying problem loosely, is that that's only one variable in the stress incontinence equation. The other thing we need to do is we need to get our organs organized. And so inversions.
Whoa, I did not. That was a zig and a zag, Mary. Okay. So inversions, you're talking about supported shoulder stand, headstand, handstand. It's just in it so briefly, right? Like,
yeah, we're in it so briefly, and handstand's fun, you know, and all that, but it's not, we're not architecturally structured to bear that much weight in our hands, wrists, and arms for too long. So I prefer, and this is also very personally very close to me because of my gynecological history and, you know, my own biology and the like, chair supported shoulder stand.
Okay.
Yes, supported Sirsasana headstand as well. This is one of the reasons why I love a headstander, is you can spend, 10 minutes without too much strain in a headstander and just let your organs move in the opposite direction of gravity. So chair-based Sharvangasana, chair-based shoulder stand is so great because the weight of the pelvis is supported. You're in a bit of lumbar extension. You know, there's a back bending element to it, which is great for the female reproductive system and in general. Of course, there are certain times of the month you don't want to be doing inversions, but generally speaking, we really want to practice supported inversions.
Okay, this is fascinating and motivating for me to do more chair shoulder stand, which is something that I I often forget to do because when I do my morning active practice, I'm like, go, 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 and then I usually
Yeah.
don't want like to do because then my supported shoulder stand always ends in a nice legs on the chair relaxation. But
Yeah.
sometimes I say, okay, instead of my meditation at the end of my practice today, I'm going to do a shoulder stand. So last sort of provocative pushback question before we close for today, Mary. Like, I've often wondered this about inversions. They're so central to the yoga asana system. And especially I come, as you do as well, like pretty strongly from the Iyengar lineage, very emphasized there. But what has always sort of irked me about these inversions is that I can't think of many, if any, other physical modalities that human beings have discovered and propagated and fallen in love with around the world over the centuries and the received wisdom of our ancestors. Like nobody else is doing this. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the things that we love about yoga, even we can say, for example, pranayama or the meditation aspects, like those wheels have been reinvented in a lot of with different naming. Even like if you look at capoeira or if you look at tomo breathing, and like you can find pieces where as a yogi you say like, oh, that's familiar, that's yoga, that's a mirroring or an echoing, or humans are using their nervous system to find what feels good. But the inversion piece, like we just don't see that
Yeah.
anywhere else, which has always made me a little bit suspicious, given that the yogis are saying this is essential, you need to do it every day, it's super important. And then I'm like, nobody else does this. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I like to take us back a few millennia,
Mhm.
okay, to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and shoulder stand, which is sort of the original inversion, if you will, in the yogic system, in the asana system that most of us are familiar with. Many of us are familiar with, I should say. We practice inversions in yoga because when we're working, so if we think, hold the Hatha Yoga Pradipika in your mind, and now let's pull up the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.
Mhm.
And we know that the first sutra is Atta Yoga Anushasana, and now an exposition or an explanation of yoga begins. And the next one is what? Yoga's Chittas Vritti Nirodhaha. Yoga is the quieting or the cessations of the wave-like modulations of the mind. The reason why, in my understanding of the texts I've talked about, and in my experience, my 3+ decades of experience in yoga and asana in particular, is that the reason why we practice inversions in yoga is because we're challenging our perspective. Because yoga is not a system of exercise or just pure meditation. Yoga is a system of spiritual liberation and freedom. And the way that we achieve our liberation and return to our truly autonomous selves is by clearing away the cobwebs of our perspectives, the veils of our illusions. And one of the ways that we're really able to do that rather quickly is to turn ourselves upside down. And then it just so happens that being upside down not only has us questioning, what if everything I believe is wrong? Has us questioning our life choices, examining our life choices, but then what's happening physiologically as well as physically. So I'm talking about what's happening in terms of our fluid dynamics, our lymphatic drainage, and things like that. Is we are actually changing the fluid dynamics in the body in such a way that it spreads the wealth of our lymphatic system through our bodies. It gets rid of inflammation. It gets rid of edema. It helps get inflammation out of our systems because most of the time we are head above the heart interacting with gravity. And so by flipping that relationship, it has some profound health benefits that are now being documented as medical technology catches up with yoga technology, that can have a profound effect on our immune function, and also how we're using our core stabilization systems to keep our visceral column of support organized. Because the thing is, when we're upside down, that's not a break for our abdominal muscles. What is holding us up in, say, headstand. Is it your shoulders? Yeah. Yeah, the weight is in your forearms, and it better be in your 90% of the weight is in your forearms, maybe 10% on your head. And that's translating up, through your shoulder girdle, up through the rib cage, through your abdominal muscles. It's your abdominal muscles that are negotiating the mass and weight of the pelvis. And this is where the bladder is located, is in the pelvis. So we're actually helping get ourselves organized. And this is why it's so important with stress incontinence that we spend time every day. And I'm sorry, it really does need to be every day. I know I say this all the time, but it doesn't have to be 30 minutes upside down. It can be 1 minute. A little yoga goes a long way.
That's the perfect place to end, Mary Richards, with your tagline at the bottom of every email that you send: a little yoga goes a long way. We're
just
so
upside down.
Your bladder will thank you.
Yes.
Let me show Mary's website and the Experiential Anatomy website one last time. Yoga with Mary Richards. Go here, sign up for her newsletter, find her on Instagram, order her wonderful new book, which is called Teach People, Not Poses, and go to please experientialanatomy.yoga and sign up for our free newsletter and join our yoga anatomy nerd community.
Yes, please do. It's super fun.
Thank you so much, Mary.
My pleasure, Lizzie. Thank you.